Hello, my name is Taylor Guthrie, and today I'm going to be talking about the power of using round-robin designs to explore social cognitive processes in the brain. So it's been a traditional goal of social neuroscience to try to understand the self and how our representation of ourself at a cognitive level is somehow distinguishable from the representations that we have of the others that we surround ourselves with. And some traditional ways that this has been approached in the past has been to either create some type of fictional other to contrast with the self, or to have each of our subjects choose a particular different other, like a best friend or a relative, to think about while in the scanner. But both of these approaches have certain limitations that kind of limit the scope of what you're able to do and the types of questions you're able to ask. And these issues are largely resolved by instead using a round robin design, by having someone come into the lab and think about themselves while in the scanner, but then also recruiting various members of a particular social network that this person belongs to, and having them also think about these particular other group members while in the scanner. But the real power and the real strength in using one of these round robin designs is that all of these other group members that we've recruited are each all a part of the study as well. So every subject is both a perceiver and a target for all of the other perceivers within their group. These are all real people. There's no fictional characters. And more importantly, we're able to directly compare representations that two people may have of the same individual, something you're not able to do when each of your subjects is thinking about a different other. Now, my advisor, Rob Chavez, did a version of the study, a round robin design, at Ohio State, where he found what he called the self-recapitulation effect. So he had someone in the scanner thinking about themselves, and he pulled this distributed pattern of activity from the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, a region of the brain that we know to be involved in social cognitive processes and self-referential processing in particular. And then he looked at how this person's self-representation was somehow similar to the representations that their group members had of them. And what he found was that there was this high degree of similarity between the representation that I have of myself and the kind of collective representation that my group has of me. This was a neural finding that was very similar to some traditional social psychology findings that show that our group members are collectively really good at predicting our personality traits. And so this was a really interesting way of showing at a cognitive level that somehow our self-representation is recapitulated in a way in the minds of our peers. And so what we wanted to do was kind of expand on this idea. And instead of just having one large group of 11 people, which was well powered for within subjects designs, we wanted to instead collect multiple small groups from various different types of social networks, from coworker groups and friend groups and academic groups. And we ended up with 20 groups in total of about 5 or 6 people. And it was 114 subjects in total. And so not only did this give us a higher powered study overall, but it also allowed us to explore some individual differences that may be modulating the different types of neural correlates that we were interested in. And so as a first step, we first wanted to try to replicate this original finding of the self-recapitulation effect. And we, in fact, did that. We found in the ventral medial prefrontal cortex of our subjects, across 114 of them, that there was this high degree of similarity between my self-representation and my group's kind of collective representation of me. But then we were able to show that the variability among individuals throughout the study was modulated by certain personality traits, such that lower levels of agreeableness were associated with higher levels of self-recapitulation, or higher degrees of similarity between my self-representation and my group's representation of me. But this was really just a first step into our analysis of this very large and very rich data set. And some current directions that we're taking in a particular line of research that I'm very interested in is looking at social relationship between perceivers, and whether the strength of these relationships is somehow predictive of similarity in representations that they have of a particular group member. So again, pulling kind of these distributed patterns of activity from various brain regions and comparing them across these different perceivers, and then looking at whether certain social relationship measures are predictive of that degree of similarity. And we found exactly that. We found that higher levels of friendship between these people, and of knowing and of liking, and how similar they were to these other people, were significantly predictive of the degrees of similarity in representations in certain brain regions, and particular ones that we know to be involved in social cognition, like the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex or the anterior insula, 2 regions you see implicated here in all 4 of these social relationship measures, such that higher degrees of friendship and knowing and liking and similarity were associated with higher degrees of similarity in those regions. And we then took this kind of one step further too, and instead of just looking at representations they had of a particular group member, we looked at representations these perceivers had kind of their group as a whole, and whether or not their representations of their group were similar, and that if this was modulated kind of by the strength of the relationship. And again, here we show that the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex is implicated in many of these social relationship measures. So higher degrees of friendship and of knowing and similarity between these perceivers was associated with higher degrees of similarity between the representations that they had kind of their group as a whole. So what this shows us is that we already know these regions are involved in social cognitive processes like person perception and social structure learning. But this shows us that the relationships within our group are important, and that the degree of friendship that we have with people, or the strength of the relationship that we have with people, is somehow predictive of the degree of similarity in the ways that we kind of represent our world or represent the people and the groups that we belong to. And so I invite you to come to my poster to explore this idea further, and to also visit. We have many research assistants, and my fellow lab member, Mariah Stendel, is also presenting work on this very, very interesting and large round robin data set. So I thank you for listening, and I look forward to some good conversation.